Start again.
Sorry, apparently there was a problem. 1 second. Right, okay, we will get this going. Right, Scott says we should start again. So we are live. Hopefully with audio this time. Right, Amy?
Can you hear me?
Barely.
I'll try to turn my fans. Right, is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Good, okay. Right, so we did the podcast about a year ago. So we thought it'd be nice to do again because we've seen a lot of the same questions being asked. We don't mind answering any questions, but we just thought if it's only one place for everybody, we've got as much as everything's team on as we can. So that's from Emma, Taya, and Carol at the moment, and Kennedy, and hopefully Taya joining us soon. We've got a list of topics just from the comments that you put on the page when we talked about doing the podcast. So we're going to work our way through the topics that you've asked us to discuss. But please feel free to ask questions as we go along, and we'll take it in turns to answer your questions as well. So if we start, Fran, do you mind starting about the wheels?
Yep, go on then. Good evening.
So we just have questions about which wheels are safe and how do you identify if a wheel is safe or not?
Yeah. For those of you that don't recognise my voice,
I think if the rest of us are mute while Fran's talking, we won't get the echo.
That's a good one.
we ready? Good. For those of you that don't know my voice, I'm Fran, aka Squazle Hugs. The topic I've been asked to discuss is wheels. I can't imagine why, because I don't know anything about wheels, do I? In the UK, there's 3 common choices for wheels. There's Carolina Storm Hedgehog wheels, there's Tic Tac wheels, and there's, of course, the Squazle Hugs bucket wheels. They all come in various styles, sizes. Generally, it's recommended you use a smooth wheel for your hedgehog. This is because hedgehogs run quite a bit and they can make the feet quite sore if they've got ridges on the wheels. Some owners do have success with the Savic Rolly wheel from Pets at Home, but personally, after a bit, I find they were quite flimsy and not suitable for my hedgehogs anyway. Smooth wheels can also give you a few issues with feet. If it's a brand new fresh hedgehog and they're having the wheel for the first time, I tend to stagger the access just so they can get the feet just a bit of a chance to harden up, just because otherwise you can find they'll have blood in the cage and things like that, which obviously it can be quite daunting at first, but obviously that's why I stagger my access. I don't really think there's much else I need to say about wheels. Anyone else got anything else? Any other questions that there was about wheels?
I was going to say if anyone else wants to say anything, but I think you've covered everything there. Have you got any questions coming in, Emma?
Sorry?
Have we got any questions coming in on that?
Not at the moment. We're joined by 6 people currently.
Okay, that's all right. Fran, we also put you down to talk about heating. So especially at the minute, I know a lot of people are in about keeping the hedgehogs cool, but we also always get questions about heating. Can you use a heat mat? Does it have to be bulbs? Does it need light?
Okay, so generally my hedgehogs have a natural day and night cycle. I don't use any additional heating. I do have some spotlights in my vivs. That is purely just for me. For when I'm cleaning, I can just turn them on and then I can see where I'm wiping, basically. For me, I actually heat my room with a Dimplex oil-free radiator, and each viv has got a pet nap, or the area where they sleep has a pet nap. The most common choices for heat sources are things like ceramic on a pulse thermostat or the pet nap, But keep in mind with the pet nap, they're not suitable as a sole heat source. They need to be used alongside another heat source. So, for example, for an older hedgehog, you could have a ceramic and the pet nap, or you could have heat the room and the pet nap. It's not suitable on its own. I know there's still quite a few people out there that use reptile heat mats, but for me, it's a big no. Some of you may know, but I actually had a fire with a reptile heat mat. It was used correctly. It was on a thermostat. It was stuck to a wall. Didn't have any bedding on it, and it actually caught fire. And I was very fortunate not to have a serious issue, basically. And the hedgehog that was in the tank made it out, and it was fine. Reptile heat mats need one whole side of airflow. They need to be stuck to the wall, basically. They don't heat the whole viv, for example. They're just not a suitable alternative for me. There's plenty of better options out there now. There's no need to keep using them. I don't understand why people still decide to use them. What else? I think that's a bit about it. Thermometers. I also use thermometers in my bibs just to monitor the temperature alongside the thermostat, because the thermostat is not always an accurate temperature and it doesn't always give you an exact temperature. Keep that in mind. Sometimes it's a few degrees out from what it reads on the thermostat. Other than that,
Fran?
I think you've heard enough from me now. A bit too much waffle.
Fran, we've got a question from Victoria, who wants to know what age should her hedgehog start using a wheel.
For my hedgehogs, personally, I give them the wheel from 10 weeks. Like I said, I alternate the nightly access. So one night they'll have the wheel, one night they'll have a forage box. And I do that for about 2 weeks. So then they end up getting the wheel full time on their own, unsupervised, at about the 12-week point.
Thank you, Fran. Just worth mentioning as well, I was recently put on an article on the page for objects, items that you need for your hedgehog. So I think there's a lot of things on the heat source on there as well, isn't there? I think there's some links to things on the document.
Yeah.
The
website is full of information, and we've got documents in our files section for everything from heat sources to vivs, to wheels and food. So utilize them.
Yeah, and it's important with the bulbs, because I've seen quite a few times we're getting people buying bulbs which are like cheap bulbs off eBay. Get things a bit cheaper, but it's not worth it when it comes to heat sources, because they don't work properly or they're dangerous.
Yeah, it's not something you can really cheap out on.
No. Okay. If we move on to, I'll talk about sand baths actually. With this one, we've seen come up quite a lot recently. We seem to have phases where people get really interested in sand baths, and I think it seems to be more when it's warm weather. I don't know why that is, but we've noticed it at the moment. Sand baths, I used to use them quite a lot personally for Harley, but I think there are better alternatives, but it doesn't mean that you can't use them. It's just not recommended to keep a sand bath in all the time. Some people use it as litter for the litter trays, and there will be people who say, I've used it all the time, I don't have a problem. That's fine, that's obviously everybody's own decisions. It's not ideal because they are breathing it in when they're using it. And if it's used as an enrichment for a short amount of time, it's not a problem. But if it's in there all the time and they're constantly breathing in that sand, it can cause issues. Particularly with male hedgehogs, they get the sand caught in bits where it shouldn't be. So it's always worth being able to wipe them down afterwards when they've used the sand, which you can't do if you're leaving it in all the time. Chinchilla sand is fine. The chinchilla dust is too dusty. I wouldn't use that. I've personally switched to using the, I don't even know how to say it, DE, the diatomaceous earth. I can't remember who told me about that, but the food grade one is really good because it's a natural antiparasite. So they can dig in a little bit of that, and we can mix it in with the sand. But they don't have to have a sand bath, it's just something you can use for enrichment if you want to. Anything to add on that?
No, I think you've got it covered. I love the DE as well. It has not just the dusting purposes, it helps with bugs and potential mite issues also, so it's multi-purpose, I suppose. It's the best of best out there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never used a sand bath with the hedgehogs, but I've used the DE powder. For the same reasons that Fran said, it's a good way to treat your Finacard and things before you put it in with the hedgehog.
Yeah. And I think as well, we've talked about this in the doing research, obviously some hedgehogs will take to it straight away, they'll dig away. Some won't be interested. In my case, I had a hedgehog used to try and eat it, so if that's the case, just don't use it.
Somebody's commented saying that they can't hear you too well, Amy.
Can you hear me okay?
It's
quite a bit. You have been coming and going a wee bit.
I'll try and move closer. Right. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's clearer.
I've got my laptop to my face. Right, next topic. So we've got Taya's with us now, isn't she?
I'm here, yeah. I'm in the
Hello.
quietest part of the house, so we're banging now.
Taya, we've had people questioning about cleaning the vivarium, so about what type of products are safe to use and what's the most efficient way of doing it.
Okay, so personally I use Finacard, but we did have a bit of a discussion about it recently between breeders, and there has been a bit of a run-in where most breeders are using quite easy flat surface products, like whether it be paper or like puppy pads, just for ease of clean. I personally use Finacard, like I said, and a lot of owners tend to put it in the freezer because you touched on mites and how like the earth, the DE earth, and how organic it can be and good for mites and internal parasites. I dust all my Finacard with that because I've got 10 hedgehogs and I can't put all my Finacard in the freezer like some people do. The other option then would be fleece. Again, a lot of new owners tend to go for that substrate, and then the way you wash it then can also affect your hedgehog's respiratory issues or their skin. So using a soft fabric is a pretty good option for that. So cleaning the viv, I tend to use F10 or I use white vinegar and water. Never ever use the neat brown Dettol because it's got some ingredient that is quite harmful to animals. But the white vinegar is pretty good for eliminating odours, and it's really good for your glass and takes away all the streaky streaks. And then for my pets and bowls and hard toys and wheels, I just use Fairy Liquid and warm water. Not too hot for my wheels because they will warp. And my secret weapon, I've got a couple of secret weapons how I clean my vivs, and I use, you're gonna think I'm nuts, is a paint scraper. And the reason why I use my paint scraper is when a lot of people line their vivs to keep them safe with some sort of lino at the bottom so it's easy to wipe, and I don't. Gav, I'm on a call. No, go away. Sorry, I'm having a conversation with my husband, the electrician. Yeah, so my secret weapon is my paint scraper because it scrapes away all like the Finacard, the loose Finacard that's gone wet and then dried up at the bottom. So that's my little secret weapon. But I also like a hard nylon brush and a Dish-O-Matic. Dish-O-Matic, I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's the little
Scrubby brush thing.
Yeah, brush. Wheels. I think that's it really. Oh, and I use my Ardap spray as well. My Ardap spray to get rid of all those little again, mites and or anything really. It's good for any insects. Just give them a little bit of a spray. It does smell quite strong. So I tend to let all the glass come off and let it all air, and then I put them back in within an hour. Then
we've got a question. We've got a question coming in on the cleaning aspect, and Victoria wants to know: is there a certain thing to use in the washing machine whilst cleaning fleece?
Non-bio powder.
Yeah, stuff you use for babies. One with a little fairy baby on it. A lot of people use soap nuts as well, because they're organic, but they can be quite pricey.
On the non-bio topic, I actually use non-bio gel in a spray bottle as well to clean my bibs mixed with water, and it makes it smell nice, and it's obviously safe and wiped with fresh water. Makes it smell a lot better than just like F10 on its own.
Yeah.
And putting the D powder on, and when you talk about the back spray as well, that goes on quite well to the other topic for Taya, which was dry skin and quilling. So sometimes people are questioning how do they know the difference between whether a hedgehog's just got dry skin or whether they've got mites.
Okay, that's a good question. Because it could be quilling as well. When they scratch, it could be quilling as well. So I tend to get your hedgehog, put it on a bit of dark material or black, and just rub the quills the opposite direction, and let this could be mites, could be dry skin, fall onto this dark material, and just look at them. And if they move, then you know they're mites.
Okay, thank you. With dry skin as well, what would you recommend spraying dry skin? Because I know I've recommended hypercare quite a lot, but people are really struggling to get hold of hypercare if their hedgehog's got dry skin or when they're quilling.
Sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Yeah, you're fading in and out again.
Methods for dry skin. So we recommend hypercare, but obviously people are struggling to get hold of hypercare at the minute. So other methods to help the hedgehog either when they're quilling or when they've got dry skin.
A lot, yeah. Hypocare used to be the one. There was a new one, a new product.
It was Leucillin or Leucillin.
That's the
like
one.
that.
Yeah. That's been highly recommended by the rescue. I haven't used it myself.
Personally, I didn't like it.
No.
I've only ever used it on dogs, so I've no experience using it on hedgehogs. But in regards to the quilling thing, the first thing you would go to is flaxseed oil.
Mhm. I don't find any of my hedgehogs have got dry skin. I don't know whether it's the diet and the food or whether it be substrate. I don't know. But the one thing I don't do is I don't bath my hedgehogs, and the only time they ever go in water is to wash their feet.
They're really, really dirty.
Yeah, really bad. But other than that, I never wash it.
And key as well, I think as well, what are people using in the bath, you know, like when they're bathing them in the sink and things like that, using too much products and too much Aveeno oil and things like that, and that could be causing the issues with the dry skin, to be honest.
I don't tend to recommend Aveeno as often as some owners and breeders. I just personally think stay away from anything that's used for humans or food.
Yeah.
Oats and stuff like that. I just don't agree with it personally.
So it's worth mentioning with the that Emma's just mentioned flaxseed oil, not to put it directly onto the skin.
Yeah, I once had a owner. This was many years ago, and she sent me a picture of an albino hedgehog, and she said, "Why is my hedgehog got a yellow line going from his head all the way down to his body?" And we were having a back and forth conversation. I said, "Have you ever put the flaxseed on the head? Because you could tell from where the frout and then just dribbling all the way down the side of his body." And she went, "Yeah, I do that." And I was like, That's why your hedgehog's yellow.
That's what it is then.
So yeah, don't do that.
Just on the extra supplements as well, something I also have used in the past, evening primrose oil. I tend to prefer that personally to flaxseed myself. I tend to think it works a bit better for me. So something else to note.
My vet recommends Yumiga cat oil as well.
Ah, see, that's something I've actually got and never used.
I've used Umega on dogs, and we used it on our elderly dog who had cancer, and the difference it made to her skin and her coat was amazing.
Right, okay. I think we've covered a lot there. I think a good one to move on to next would be Kennedy. Talking about the risks and the benefits of taking hedgehogs outside, that might link into like that.
Yeah, so so at the moment it's becoming sort of warmer and we're getting into summertime, and we see a lot of posts of people taking their hogs out, and I think that a lot of the questions that get asked, and I think the breeders get asked this a lot as well, is whether or not people can take their hogs out and about and also in the garden. And so I've sort of looked into the pros and cons of both in terms of taking hogs out and about with you when you go out in snuggle pouches and things like that, but also when people have them out on the grass, whether that's in your back garden or whether that's, you take them to the park with you. So when you're talking about taking hogs out and about in your snuggle pouches and things, I think that there's quite a divide between people that do and don't do this. So I personally, I do take people out with me and come to shots with me. Albeit it's only for short periods of time, with all things reasonable in terms of how long you have them out for. But pros, sorry.
Yeah, can you mute your mic?
I've got a little bit of feedback. Is that better? We've still got feedback. Yeah, there's a bit of feedback coming from someone, so I can hear myself.
Yeah, I think it's energy.
Oh my god, I'm just sitting quietly. I am sorry.
I think it's energy reflection on you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, that's better. So the pros of taking them out and about, in snuggle pouches, you can get them used to new sounds and smells, and particularly when you take them to see, your gran, or anything like that, it gets them used to other human interaction that isn't just you. And I find that that's something that actually your hog gets used to, or mine have anyway. They get used to me, and then if other people haven't been coming in and out and holding them, when it's not me that's holding them, there tends to be an issue, or there can be an issue. And so I find that having other human interaction is helpful, particularly for when then you need to go to the vets and things. It just gets them used to being out and about, and it's bonding time as well, although it might not seem like you're directly bonding with them. But there are obviously cons to this. Big one being waking them up. So it's really important to let them get a decent amount of sleep. And when we talk about taking hogs out in their snuggle pouches and things, I don't think anybody means literally have them out and about, just exploring the world in your hands constantly the whole time that you're out. So it's important to let them sleep and not just have them awake. Another thing to think about is temperature control. So it's obviously a lot more difficult to make sure that they're staying warm when you're out and about with them, and that's both if they're out and about in a snuggle pouch with you, or if they're on the grass just out in the garden. So think about ways that you can control their temperature, make sure that they're keeping warm. Little hand warmers that you can get are really good for that. Again, with both of those being reasonable, like I mentioned, so not having them out for ridiculous lengths of time. and also consider dangers. And that's for both of those, really, more so for when you have hogs out just on the grass. I know that a lot of people put up guinea pig runs and other things to keep hogs in enclosed spaces, which is great, but also you have to consider that there could be a couple of dangers that come with that. There can be parasites out and about, in not only on the grass, but also in the bugs. If they go and eat anything that could be carrying other pesticides or things like this, any other toxic edibles for that matter, that they want to go and anoint on, the smells are fab for them, so they'll go and rub grass all over themselves, which will also have a lot of nasties in them. And also, I think a lot of people don't consider predators as a thing. But if you're just going to leave your hog out and about and go and, do the washing up or whatever, you have to consider that they're a small animal running about in an open space, and anything can sort of come and take a run at them if they felt like it, or from above. And then the last thing on that is, if they're not in a run, people seem to forget that they will run. And so if you have them out in a wide open space, the first thing that they'll do, most likely, is run to the nearest bush. And I know a lot of people, use that, well, I can outrun my hedgehog, which is fine. But once they get into a bush and or underneath your shed or anywhere else that they shouldn't be, it then becomes very difficult to push them out again. So that's all things to consider when taking them outdoors. I personally think that it's up to each individual owner whether or not they do that. As long as you're being reasonable, you're being safe, and you're considering all the aspects that they need in terms of the right amount of sleep and decent temperature control, then I think it's a really good way to get them used to other experiences that they wouldn't usually have if they're just in the viv and being woken up in the evenings. And it just means that if the time came that you did need to take them out, for example, to take them to the vets, they're a lot less likely. I mean, I'm sure they will still give you a hard time for it, but they're probably a lot less likely to be angry at you. So I think really that's all.
Yeah, you've covered a lot there. When you mentioned about them running under bushes and things, or possibly outrunning you when they're outside, there was an instance a couple of years ago. I can't remember who it was now, but there was somebody who lost a hedgehog down a rabbit hole. Does anyone else remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, she never got to that.
Oh, that's
I don't think she ever. I think it was in a park, and they were letting her go on the grass, and she just shot off down a rabbit hole. There's not really what you can do. Okay, from Kennedy's point about taking them outside, we've had a lot of questions about their light and their dark cycle. So partly to do with taking them outside is
Amy?
whether it affects the light and dark cycle.
Amy?
Yes.
We're struggling to hear you again.
Oh no. I don't know what it is. I've literally got my laptop in my head.
Should have used your phone.
I know. I thought the laptop would be easier. Right, I'll try again. So yeah, about taking them outside to the light and the dark cycle. But somebody mentioned about if you sat at night time with the enclosure in the room and you've got the light on, is that going to be detrimental to the hedgehog? Because obviously it's light when it should be dark.
Yeah, so am I taking this one again?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people also forget that although as well as hogs needing a decent heat setup, they also need a stable light and dark schedule, and that not having that can also cause a hibernation attempt. So in fact, the first and only hibernation attempt I've ever had was with my previous girl, and that wasn't because of temperature, that was because of light. So it was during my exams at uni, and basically I'd just stayed up for 3 or 4 days and had the light on, and I thought she was fine, but obviously this threw her light and dark cycle off, and she ended up having a hibernation attempt. She was fine, but just that can happen. So usually natural light is fine if you have your viv or your whatever enclosure you use. If you have it in a room with a decent amount of light coming in and out, and it sort of transitions from light to dark as normal, that tends to be okay, and they don't really have a problem with it. Some people have their LED strip lights on a timer. So, for example, I have my Viv in the bedroom, and where sometimes I don't always open the curtains, I have a LED strip light on a timer on a 12-hour cycle. So I have it on from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and then it goes off at 7 p.m. and she'll sort of wake up. But if you know that you're going to have lights on for a long period of time, which is what I've learned from next exam periods that I had after my last hibernation attempt, I sort of just think ahead, and you can either cover them with a blanket, a breathable blanket, obviously don't suffocate, move them to another room where there's not going to be as much interference with the light schedule going on. But it's just something to think about, really. I think that's all on that one.
Yeah, thank you. I think the particular question that was asked was to do with being in the room, so that could be solved with the blanket. I'm just going to talk. Can you hear me well enough now before I go on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good, okay. People have asked about what to expect when they bring a new hedgehog home. So I think a lot of it is, if you go with a good breeder, they will prepare you well enough for when you're taking the hedgehog home. I think far too many people expect that within a week, 2 weeks, this baby hedgehog is going to become really cuddly, your best friend, but it is not always the case. Sometimes if you've got a hedgehog that is really socialised with the breeder, it doesn't necessarily mean that when they come home with you, they will be the same. And it's like when people get a puppy, you've got to recognise that they're coming away from the environment that they're used to. They're going into a new surrounding that smells funny, with somebody different who handles them differently. So they are going to take some time to come around. You will get the anomaly where the hedgehog is absolutely fine from the day you bring it home. And some hedgehogs will always be grumpy. It doesn't matter how much you socialise some hedgehogs, it's just in their nature. They will be grumps, and you've just got to embrace the personality. When you bring home a baby, obviously Tay's talked about quilling, so they do quill as babies. Some hedgehogs do quill yearly as well. Some will never quill again for 12 weeks. It doesn't just depend, but just to be aware that when they are quilling, they will be quite grumpy. They will get dry skin, so don't be concerned when they have a few quills falling out. And also, transitioning food, I think, is another one when you bring a hedgehog home. So they should get the food from the breeder that they're used to. That doesn't mean you've got to keep exactly the same biscuit mix. But when you do transition them over, make sure you do it gradually so that you're not upsetting tummies. And also, what they're used to beforehand, even if they're not coming from a breeder, if they're coming from, the reform or whatever it is, make sure you know what sort of temperatures they're used to, what sort of things do they like, and you can work from there to try and build a bond with them as well. And when Kennedy was talking about taking hedgehogs out with you to try and help socialise them, that's really important when they first come home to you. So don't be scared of handling them because they're not used to you. Don't put it off for days, because all you do is have a detrimental effect on the overall socialisation because you're just putting it off. Be as confident as you can be, and it pays off with the hedgehog. Would anyone like to add to that?
The only thing I can think to really add is that sometimes when a hoglet has travelled in the car or has had a change of routine, they can have an upset stomach. So if you get your hoglet home and he's got runny poo for a couple of days, don't panic. It's not all hedgehogs are the same.
The same with eating as well, I suppose, because we've had a few people worried when the hedgehogs come home that they're not really eating. And for a few days, that's normal because, again, they've been upset, they've been moved, things are strange. So for the first couple of days, if they're not eating properly, we wouldn't worry about it. Did you want to say something, Karen?
Sorry, I was going to say, going back to the runny poo situation, it could be water as well, because some of my hedgehogs might go up to Scotland or England, and we've got quite soft water, and other places got hard water, and some places got more fluoride than others. So I think, again, that can cause upset stomachs as well.
Yeah, that's true.
I think as well. Oh, sorry. The wee thing that I thought it might be worth adding in is just the fact that I think with new owners there can be a little bit of worry about, the hedgehog responding to them negatively or seeming hostile or whatever. And I think sometimes new owners, it takes them a little while to get to grips with what the actual basic nature of the animal is. They do behave differently from kittens and puppies and things. They are quite defensive little animals. They get a fright easily because they can't see very well. They do display a lot of normal behaviours that they would just always do. But an experienced owner is used to that and doesn't think anything of it. But it can be quite unsettling or even sometimes a little bit upsetting for new owners that just aren't used to these things and feels as if the animal doesn't like them. But they're really just being a hedgehog.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think new owners see photos of these cute, cuddly, sleepy hedgehogs, and I don't think people realise how many photos, or very rare occasion, you would get at that kind of photo.
Take about 100 pictures just to get them on.
And it's like once in a blue moon that they just snuggle up and go to sleep and they look all cute and happy. That's very rare.
Okay, thank you. Carol, I'm going to come to you next, and then we can lead on to Emma after you. We've had people, they're always asking questions about food, which I know we've got the food file on the group.
Sure.
However, I think people just want a little bit more information on how they're supposed to choose which biscuits to use for their particular hedgehog. There is a big list and it's got the fat content, but people, especially new owners, are a little bit confused when it comes to choosing which biscuits are best for their hedgehog.
Sure.
And while we're on the point of diet as well, if we can just chat a little bit about insects. Which insects are treats, which ones should we be feeding all the time, and is it really, really important to be feeding insects?
Okay, no problem. Can you all hear me? Am I picking up or anything? I'm all right.
Yeah, you're fine. I can hear you.
Okay, well, starting off with biscuits, the range that you get in the supermarkets isn't very good, and I think people do find that quite limiting. So I buy the majority of my pet food online. Sometimes I might go into a pet shop or go into Pets at Home, but I buy most stuff online, and then I get to shop around and find good prices as well. I buy quite a lot of stuff off Zoo Plus, although I do also use Pets at Home as well. I think it's important when you're looking at the when you're looking at the biscuits and you're looking at the back of the packet, in terms of the sort of percentages that you're looking at, the kind of nutritional value that you want the biscuits to have, you're looking for fat content roughly between 30 to 35%. Did I say fat or protein? Protein content 30 to 35%. And fat between about 10 to 15%. But it's also important to look at the actual ingredients that are in the food. You want to avoid cereals as much as possible. You want meat to be the first ingredient. If it says things like byproducts, then that's a sign of a poor quality food. If things like cereals and rice and things like that are listed before the meat, then again that's another sign it's a low quality food. It's just not going to have a lot of nutrition. Foods like that, some of us were actually speaking the other day that cereal based foods, the hoglets don't seem to grow as well on them, apart from anything else. They do seem to affect weight, even if the food is low fat. Sometimes these sort of cereal based products seem to blow the hedgehogs up. I guess maybe they don't digest the cereals that well, and it can contribute to weight problems and things like that. So grain free is good, although sometimes in my experience the grain free products can be a little bit higher in fat. But if you've got a mix of maybe like 3 or 4 different products, I would recommend trying to pick at least one grain free amongst that. And as I said, poultry-based, ideally, is what you would be looking for. Again, quality-wise, if it says something like dried chicken or chicken meal or something like that, it's probably higher quality than if it says like poultry meal or poultry protein or something like that, which basically means it's like, you know, different species just all ground together and thrown in the pot sort of a thing. I think most of us do agree that feeding insects is also important. The hedgehogs get loads of enjoyment out of it. It's obviously a natural thing for them. It's good enrichment. And also there's a certain type of fibre in the insects as well, which helps the hedgehog to digest their food. I'm never really sure how to pronounce it. Chitin, something like that. Most of you have probably heard of that. So most of us do feed insects on a regular basis, at least a few times per week. In the last couple of years, there's been a push for, you know, in some sectors towards feeding a more natural diet, a diet that's composed of a high proportion of insects and natural foods like raw meats and that sort of a thing. We don't recommend that because it's easy for the diet to become imbalanced if you attempt a natural diet. As well as the hedgehogs, I keep tenrecs. With the tenrecs, a lot of breeders seem to go for a more sort of insect-based diet. And within the tenrecs, from what I've seen, there can be quite a lot of problems with metabolic bone disease, which is caused by a lack of calcium and or vitamin D3. So the purpose of feeding these complete diets, dry cat food and similar products, is because it is nutritionally balanced. It's got all the vitamins and minerals in it that they need. So it is definitely worthwhile. If you spoil your animal and you throw lots of insects at it, it is going to stop eating the biscuits as well. They're always going to pick what they prefer, what they enjoy the most. So that's another reason to exercise moderation. Most farmed insects are low in calcium as well. They don't have the same nutritional the same sort of nutritional qualities that you would expect from wild insects that have been rolling about in the soil, or the animals eating the insects and it's soaking up like loads of sand and vegetation and stuff like that. So most farmed insects are low in calcium, apart from calciworms. Things like roaches and locusts are probably the best quality insects to feed your hedgehog as well. So I would say calciworms, locusts and roaches, you could feed them a few times per week. Things like mealworms and moriel worms are a bit less nutritious and do have a reputation for being low in calcium, so you might want to limit them to like once or twice per week. A lot of people worry a lot about mealworms. There were a lot of problems in wild hedgehog populations, and some of the wild rescues had just started telling the public not to feed mealworms to European hedgehogs. I suspect that was probably dried mealworms, and that they were being fed in very large quantities. They are very low in calcium, and they will cause a serious nutritional problem if that becomes the animal's staple diet. With live mealworms and moriel worms, you can gut load them. You can feed them good fruit and veg that will make them more nutritious. You can buy bug food that is high protein, high calcium. I do also tend to sprinkle a calcium and D3 supplement over the bug food as I'm putting it in. And you can also dust the insects with one of these products with a supplement before you feed them to your hedgehog as well. So, the animals enjoy these things. I wouldn't worry too much about using them, just as long as they're in moderation. And as I said, you can boost their nutritional value by gut loading them and dusting them as well.
We've got a question from MX2 who says, is it possible that insects may upset a hedgehog's stomach? I feel that mine is at the moment with mealworms.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, you know, I can only really go from personal experience. I've not heard anything like that. Certainly my hedgehogs, when at nights when they've had a good amount of insects, without going into too much detail, but the quality of their poo would actually tend to be better the next day. And if you've got a hedgehog that has an upset stomach and you give it, you know, some mealworms or moriel worms or whatever, then I do find it can sort of firm things up a little bit. So I wouldn't have thought that would be the problem. What I would say...
Sorry, Carol, can I just add in?
Yeah.
And when I first got Molly, he didn't eat live insects at all. That was to do with the breeder. So I spent a long time trying to get him to eat them, because obviously when they don't have them as a small baby, it's a lot harder to get them onto them when they're a bit older. But when I did eventually get him eating them, I did find that if he had too many at once, so I'd start him with maybe a couple of crickets, a few mealworms, but if he had too many, he would get really runny poos. I think that was just because the stomach wasn't used to it. And over time, the more that he had them, I used probiotic powder. Eventually, they didn't affect him at all, but I did find that it was probably about 1 by the time he started eating insects. And it did give him runny poos at first, but I think that's like with any food when they go on to something new.
Yeah, sure.
I do wonder if maybe it could be an allergy to whatever the mealworms are being kept on, rather than to the mealworms themselves.
Yeah, possibly.
I suppose it's like any animal as well. You know, people get all sorts of strange allergies and things. So I dare say you maybe get the odd animal that's got some sort of intolerance that you wouldn't expect.
Victoria wants to know, how many locusts and crickets should she feed it daily?
It depends on the size of them. I tend to buy the adult locusts, and I think, you know, two or maybe 3 is enough. Crickets are smaller. I would maybe give... I tend to freeze my crickets. I'm not great with the crickets, and freezing them actually kills off any pinworm eggs that they might be carrying as well, because they can't carry pinworms apparently. But with the crickets, I would maybe give just like a sort of heaped teaspoon of the frozen ones. I don't know if that'd maybe be about 6.
Okay.
I do about 6, Carol.
MX2 has responded and said that the problem with the mealworms is recent, so it's not an ongoing problem. It's a new one.
Right. Is that talking about the issue to do with metabolic bone disease?
No, it's the hedgehog that gets an upset stomach from eating mealworms.
Okay. You could try and cut mealworms out for a little while and see if that helped, but it does seem likely that there could be something else going on. It might be a good idea to add some probiotic to the water for maybe about a week or so, and see if that helps. If not, then it might be a case of asking your vet to examine the poo, just to see if there's some sort of nasties lurking in there. But process of elimination, you know, if you try cutting the mealworms out and there's an improvement, then you know that is the issue.
Okay, thanks, Carol.
Thank you. Emma, we could move on to you. So, talking about diet, we get questioned a lot about hedgehog's weight. And we do always tell people that we don't have a strict diet because every hedgehog is different. But people have been wondering if there's any more guidance we can give them besides, if your hedgehog can't go into a ball, then clearly it's too overweight. And they should be sort of potato shaped. But can you give a bit of on how they're supposed to know if the hedgehog is the right weight?
Yeah, I mean, when I came into hedgehogs a long time ago now, the guidelines were that if your hedgehog was 300 grams, to 350, that was about acceptable. Anything over that was overweight, and anything under that was underweight. We now obviously know a lot more than we did then, and it really does depend on the hedgehog. Carol can vouch for this because she's had a couple of really big lads. But some hedgehogs are just big, and dieting them and things like that won't shift it because that's just them. The same goes for really small hedgehogs. Some are just naturally small. I bred a little boy called Finn, and he never got above 280. But he looked perfect for his size. So it really does depend on the hedgehog. As you said, if they can't ball up, then clearly there's a problem, that needs addressing. And the easiest way to do that is to move them onto a low-fat diet. As Carol said earlier, cutting out any foods that have cereals and junk food, basically, is a good way to help with weight loss. With weight gain, so we've found that older hedgehogs tend to struggle to keep weight on. A higher fat food in moderation would benefit, and as Carol touched on, a good quality of live insects. But yeah, as a general rule, if your hedgehog looks normal sized, then just stick with it. Don't diet them for the sake of dieting them because they don't fit within that 300 to 350 gram ratio.
I do think it's quite obvious to see sometimes as well. If a hedgehog's overweight, you can see the fat on them, can't you? And if they're underweight, you can see that they're caving in. I think if you're not concerned when you look at your hedgehog, then chances are they're okay.
Yeah, do you know, when you were speaking there, I was actually just thinking about that. Like Dario, he's a good age now. He's a bit thinner now, but Fat Boy, as I used to call him, that
He was a beefcake and a half.
Yeah. But I mean, when he was at his kind of full chubby glory, he had really noticeable moves, and it was kind of funny, And I struggled to get him to lose weight, but I mean, it was very noticeable. He did have a wee double chin, and he did have like this really sort of squishy, ripply sort of chest area going on,
Yeah.
It's made me think about recently because I had my girl, her heaviest was just over 500 grams, and she never looked fat. Like she looked like a little chunky, but she was always okay. And then obviously I've got Biscuit, the foster. He was 540, and he clearly looks overweight. Like there's such a big difference.
Yeah, I think it's the same as with people. Some suit a certain weight better than others. I think as long as there's no obvious, I mean, one of the common problems in overweight hedgehogs is that the areas around the bum get red raw from dragging along the floor, basically. And unless there's things like that are prompting a genuine concern, then I don't see why you would do anything other than a simple diet change to cut out anything that maybe, isn't benefiting them.
If we stay with you on this one, Emma, and Carol might be helpful for this question too, about if a hedgehog is underweight, because I think people find it a little bit easier if they're overweight. They know that they need to lower the fat, they need to cut down the food. But when they're underweight, tips for helping them to put weight on the hedgehog.
Well, for me, the go-to food that I use to help hedgehogs gain weight is Arden Grange, grain-free chicken food, and the hedgehogs just gobble it up like nothing. Apart from that, the only other thing is maybe, I mean, Carol's better with this than me, but would be to feed something like waxworms that are quite high in fat.
And pinkies too.
Sometimes sometimes I'll offer, you can get like kitten food that's like whipped like a mousse. Royal Canin Baby Cat is one that I buy in sometimes. And my wee old man, who is 6.5 and is, really quite small and thin and whatever else, he loves that, and I think that helps to keep his weight up a little bit.
Yeah, and touching on that, there's if your hedgehog is recovering from surgery or is unwell, then there's the Hills AD restorative care food, which is great for kind of helping them while they're recovering.
And there's also the Oxbow critical care, isn't there?
Yeah, in the same notion, it's more geared towards hedgehogs that are recovering or are unwell. But as a general rule, a good kind of way to gain weight onto a hedgehog, if they need it, is just a nice variety of live food and a high quality mix, really.
I always tend to recommend pinkies as well when people ask this question. I know a lot of people don't like to feed pinkies because it's a baby mouse.
I'm one of those people. I'm too soft to do it.
Yeah, and that's fair. That's probably why you go with the biscuits and that's all. I always use pinkies for Harley because he was always tiny, and they're not. It's not nice to watch. It does get quite messy. But if you are struggling, they're really nutritious as well. So if it's something you can bring yourself to do, that's always an option for putting weight on as well. Anyone want to add to weight?
Personally, I use also as an addition to help them gain weight. I use kitten milk and I mix in Nutrabol and calcium. So that, for me, that works. I know an owner who's struggled with her hedgehog gaining weight, and it's helped wonders with her. So that's something else I'd look at if you were struggling and looking for a way to boost your hedgehog nutritionally. Obviously not too much because it can give them the runs, but it helps for a little boost.
It's not really something you would want to do long term, but kitten biscuits as well for if you've got like a really small underdeveloped looking hoglet or something like that, or an animal recovering from illness that you're struggling to get it back onto the biscuit mix or whatever else, or your wheeled ones that maybe don't have many teeth left.
I was just going to say the kitten biscuits, obviously they're quite smaller, so they're easier to manage for smaller hedgehogs or older hedgehogs that are lacking teeth. So you can also soak your biscuits in water if they're struggling with the teeth. That's another thing to consider. And I know quite a few don't do it, but I do mix vitamin powders in with my food. So it helps give them a boost if the older hedgehogs are struggling.
Okay, we've only got a couple of topics left that have already been asked, so obviously if any questions come in, we can address them as they come in. The only other thing, who wanted to talk about biting, if someone has an issue with the hedgehog biting them? Does anyone want to take that one?
Who, me? What?
Anybody. Anyone who wants to take that one. If your hedgehog's biting you for no reason.
Go on, Carol.
Oh, okay. Well, the usual advice is that usually there might be some indications of why your hedgehog is biting. Hedgehogs will often like the smell of things that might be on your hands, or the smell of things that are on the fabric of your clothes and things like that. And they might just want to have a bit of a nibble and a bit of a chew because it tastes nice or it tastes interesting and they want to anoint and stuff. If that's what is going on, you will tend to find that they show a little bit of interest and there's a wee bit of warning. They get a bit licky, they might get a bit nibbly before they go for the chomp, right? So if that seems to be what is happening, then if you just wash your hands, if you're just mindful of what you've been touching, before you hold your animal, then obviously that will help. If you see them starting to get like a little bit nibbly or starting to kind of chew on sort of quite tight clothing, and you think they might end up getting your skin or whatever, the thing to do would just be to move them away from that area. Hedgehogs can get into, it's not that common, but they can get into bad habits in terms of aggressive biting. And if the animal has been good-natured for a period of time and then just suddenly starts biting, then it might be an indication that they're in some sort of distress, they're in pain or something like that, and it's affecting their mood and their behaviour. So if it seems to be unexplained, then it might be a good idea to get a vet check done just to rule any underlying issues out. I've only had limited experience of that myself. I used to have a really lovely girl, a leucistic girl, and she was super friendly. But I do remember that she had got hair wrapped around her foot on one particular night, and I had to try and hold her still to get the hair off. And it was digging in a little bit. It was clearly causing her a bit of discomfort. And she just turned into a savage beast. I mean, she actually leapt about 2 feet from the bottom of my knees right up my body and ended up hanging off my belly dramatically. And I think, that experience did sort of send that message home to me, because I had heard other people saying that. So that is something to take into consideration. But, hedgehogs can get into bad habits as well. If they're feeling a bit grumpy and they bite you once and that causes a reaction that unwittingly reinforces the behaviour. If they're feeling grumpy because they've been out for too long and they want to be put down or whatever, and they nip or bite and then they get put back into their vivarium, then that will tend to reinforce the behaviour and it can become a bit more of a habit. I dare say some animals, maybe even if they bite you and the owner maybe squeals a bit or something, that there can end up being some kind of feedback thing going on. So there's a few different things that you can do. I mean, if a hedgehog is latched onto your hand and won't let go, then if you blow out a puff of air into its face, then that will hopefully give them a wee fright and they'll tend to let go. Me personally, if the odd time that I've been bitten, I tend to talk to them in a bit of a big sort of quite loud stroppy voice and sort of tell them off, which can be a little bit embarrassing in summertime when the windows are open and maybe the neighbours are out in the garden and stuff. But that would be the first strategy. If they are in a kind of cycle of biting, then I would say just pick them up with a blanket, keep your hands away from their face. And hopefully, if they don't really get much opportunity to bite over a period of time, they'll maybe forget that they want to. So that's the things that I tend to do and that have worked for me quite well. I have had a few that have chomped me a couple of times, but it's never ended up being like a long-term problem that's went on. And I tend to think that my kind of stroppy voice might help a little bit. But I don't know. Other people have probably got other ideas as well.
So if his hedgehog is biting, they want to pull them off. Right. So the last topic we've got that needed discussing was kink. I think this one might have come up because we're in lockdown and everyone's getting bored, people are decorating, and we've seen quite a few people wanting to repaint vivariums or making little houses or whatever it is. So,
Amy, we can't hear you.
Unfortunately.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got people who are decorating, wanting to repaint vivariums, wanting to paint houses. So if Kennedy, could you just give us a little bit of advice on hedgehog safety?
Yeah, so usually we would leave this to our lovely Cara from Huffy Pops, but she's not with us unfortunately, so I'm just going to take this one. So basically any water-based and most non-toxic acrylic paints are safe, but for the most part they'll say child safe and or also pet safe. So it's just best to check with whatever paint you're using. A quick Google, or even on the paint itself, it should tell you whether or not it's toxic. So child friendly tends also to be pet safe. So Colin and Cara from Huffy Pops, I know that most of us, quite a few of us, will have either houses or feeding tables or lots of different things from them. And so Colin uses a low odour quick dry varnish to seal the paint once he's finished. But it's key to remember that other varnishes that aren't like that will need days to air out, and I dare say that that's the same with the majority of paints as well. Just to be on the safe side, I think it's key to, if you're going to paint either Vivs or anything else that's going in contact with your hog, it's probably best to just let it air out for a few days rather than straight away, put them in it. And whilst I'm on that topic, I came across a new brand of paint called Frenchique paint. I'm not sure, I'll put that somewhere, hold on. If I put that in the chat, or if Josh is listening, you can do it. I will get that somewhere. But Frenchique paint is really good, and that's pet and child safe. And they have something called an alfresco range, which incorporates a finishing coat into it. And that's also waterproof and wipe friendly. So I found that was really, really easy to use. So just if anyone wanted an actual example of a paint that could be quite useful. But as always, I think it's always best to be careful with picking paints, and remember that any paint you use, really, even if it has finishing coats and varnishes on it, it's going to be subject to wear and tear. So just be conscious that, whilst you're scrubbing, I think Josh has put in the comments the name of that paint that I was just talking about. But yeah, any paint's going to be subject to wear and tear when hogs are weeing and doing all sorts all over it, and you're scrubbing that away. So any paint really is going to eventually have some wear and tear. But in terms of toxicity, it's just water-based and non-toxic acrylic paints.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the topics we got asked about. So unless we've got any questions, Emma?
Nope, not that I can see.
Okay, so it's just worth mentioning that we've just done this to try and get a lot of questions answered all at once, but obviously we are available on the page all the time if anybody has questions. And don't forget that we do have the file section as well. So all the foods that we've talked about, a lot of the products that we've talked about, they will be in the files as well.
The only other thing is that we're hoping that over the next few weeks we can incorporate some sort of Zoom get-together, maybe once a month or so, where members can come in and video chat with us and ask questions. So we'll be expanding on this.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right, thank you
everyone.
to everybody for joining us.
And this will be available after.
Yeah, it'll be available to watch pretty much from as soon as we end onwards.
All right, thank you, everybody.